Stars Matter in the Until Saturday feed. I'm Mitch Light, joined by Manny Navarro. Manny has been one of the busier guys at The Athletic this week. I know, working on a story on the IMG Academy, but also churning out a lot of preseason Miami Hurricanes content. The Canes open Friday night. I know you're excited, Manny. We actually have some football to watch.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Enough of this preseason stuff. Let's get some games going.
I totally agree. Love the offseason. That's what keeps us going, but really we do it all for the actual games. Also joined by Grace Rayner. Grace is multitasking. Earlier today, sources are telling me she has vetoed certain color palettes for her wedding next summer. We'll have all off season to preview, break down the wedding. But also, Grace doing a great job covering recruiting for us. Her first quarterback prospect story of the week was up last year. She started this every Monday morning. She touched bases with players and coaches, the top quarterbacks in the country from how they did previous Friday, Saturday. My long-winded way of saying this came out Monday. Some really good insight on Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, some of the great quarterbacks. I know, Grace, this is a fun project you enjoy doing, and I think so far it's clear the readers like it as well.
Yeah, I think it's really enlightening to hear from the high school coaches. And I think last year we were all like so focused on Arch Manning every week that maybe some of the other guys didn't fall by the wayside, but we were just so laser focused in on Arch Manning. But this class is really talented all the way from 1 to 10. So we're only 1 week in, but it's been super enlightening so far for me.
Yeah, and what's cool too is a lot of these guys will eventually, not a lot, some will start playing each other. Some of these schools play a national schedule, and it's not just beating up on 70-0 type games. Some of these guys do face a lot of good competition, so we look forward to reading that. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Drop us a 5-star review and leave us a question with your review, and we will answer on the show. Subscribe to Until Saturday on YouTube. Be sure to join us live every Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday on YouTube throughout the season as we preview and react to the weekend's games and hear from you, the listeners, on our Sunday Sound Off stream. Leave us a voicemail or text on the Until Saturday phone line at 316-462-9852. And unlike our good friend Ari Wasserman, I was able to read those.
I was just wondering if you were going to get through that.
You know what? I didn't even, if your listeners out there, where's Ari? Right now, Ari's probably somewhere on, I don't know, is it I-35? I really don't know. Driving from Austin back to Dallas. He's been on the road practically all month. Could not join us today, but Ari will be back next week. The takes will be scorching after missing out on 1 week. And one more item, sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter where you'll get your daily fill of college football news right into your inbox. And if you guys have not checked that out, Jana Bartle, one of our editors, one of my colleagues, has done a great job along with Daniel Shirley, getting some great content every morning on the in the Until Saturday newsletter. So good show today. We're going to review some of the big recent commits, take a look at the quarterback market, which is not a lot of meat on the bone there with the quarterbacks in the class of 2024 for those programs that still need one. We're going to take a stab at some preseason recruiting predictions and how this class will shake out when it's all said and done. We have a few mailbag questions and some trivia as well. All right, time to get to it. Not a lot in the past week, really not a lot shook out on the recruiting front, Manny, but you were there were two that you were following closely and a lot of drama. Grace used this recently in something she wrote. Drama during the recruiting process usually means drama on signing day or in the signing period. I say that to say this. David Stone commits to Oklahoma, but I don't know if we've seen the last of David Stone recruiting news, Manny.
Yeah, obviously Miami and Michigan State put a lot of effort into trying to convince him to not stay home. And according to David and what he told 247 Sports, I guess shortly after making his commitment on national television, was that he really didn't make up his mind until the final minute, right? Like it was pretty much Miami or Oklahoma down the stretch. And if you watch the broadcast, I think he had either siblings or cousins there with poster boards that looked like a UM, logo. And so
this wasn't Landon Collins-esque, but it was close, right?
It was very close. His mom, I guess, essentially wanted him to go to Miami. The family really, and I knew that, he had really enjoyed the family and him had really enjoyed their experience coming to visit Miami. They'd been here 4 or 5 times on unofficials and official visits. So it really came down to the wire. And obviously I don't think Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes are going to stop trying to push to get David Stone. They've got, he's at IMG Academy, which isn't that far away, and recruited, that school pretty proficiently. So I think as much as David Stone may have already sort of made up his mind, it's not over, because until he signs on that paper, Mom and everybody else might say, hey, man, you should really go to Miami, and we could see a flip later on.
Yeah, just to clarify, he's an Oklahoma City native who plays at IMG, I think, since his junior year. So that's that whole thing, Manny, where I know readers always have questions about, and we kind of wrestle with, do you consider him a Florida kid, or do you consider him an Oklahoma kid? In this case, I think you consider them both. I'm sure the proximity to Miami helped, but maybe it didn't. Miami's sort of recruiting nationally. Earlier in the day, there was some more drama. Zaquan Patterson, an athlete, considered an athlete. I think most teams are recruiting him as a safety from South Florida. The tea leaves seem to be pointing towards Tallahassee, but the commitment went towards the Hurricanes instead.
Yeah, I was there for that. I was at the doubleheader at St. Thomas Aquinas when Chaminade had played St. Francis Academy in the opener of that doubleheader there at Aquinas. And, all the rumors all week were he's going to Florida State, and that's where he really wants to play. And but, from being there on Saturday, I kind of gathered that not a lot of people had spoken to Zaquan, and whatever sort of was emanating out of Florida State, whatever confidence was sort of their internal confidence. And I think a lot of national reporters sort of jumped on that and believed that he was going to go there, when in reality, I think Patterson certainly was interested by what Miami offered. The fact that Cam Kitchens will probably be leaving for the NFL after the season. He could, they're kind of thin at the safety position. So there's an opportunity, I think, for him to come in right away and play. And Miami's NIL certainly, I think, played a role in helping convince him. But, hey, that's the name of the game now.
Yeah, and this is not a critique of the recruiting industry, because we're guilty of this as well. And Grace, I know you have trouble, or all you guys who cover recruiting often have trouble getting in touch with the right people. There's a lot of groupthink in recruiting, coverage. You kind of, someone who you respect thinks their kid's going somewhere, and okay, that makes sense. And then that's kind of like, maybe that's what happened with Patterson, Florida State, but maybe not. But sometimes it's tough until you really talk to the kid. And in the David Stone case, you could have talked to him a day earlier, and you think he's going to Miami, and kid changes his mind 5 minutes after. Another notable commitment, Trevor Jackson, quarterback, a guy that we've all kind of followed in the past 6 months. Manny, we joke about discovering guys. You discovered him at a camp throwing, a kid from Orlando quarterback who really impressed at the Elite 11 out in Los Angeles. I know Ari enjoyed watching him compete there, to Ole Miss. And to me, guys, this is interesting, because we're going to talk about uncommitted quarterbacks, and he was the top one. At this point, it's sort of like a puzzle. It's like, who's left? Who needs a quarterback? Because, Texas A&M was hot after him, but Texas A&M took a second quarterback commitment a few months ago. Penn State was interested, but then Penn State gets a quarterback commit. So it's like, I find this the most interesting part of covering recruiting, not just because it's the most important position, but the fact that teams really only want one quarterback and kids only want to be the only quarterback. So, Grace, this was kind of fun one to watch, but Ole Miss just seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it seemed like, speaking of groupthink, it seemed like it was trending in that direction for a little while. But yeah, I mean, you look at the quarterback landscape now, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's one of the top 50 that is not committed. Like, the top 40 guys are committed, have a school. And I think you're right, Mitch, like, so much of it is the domino effect across different programs. Of course, you want to be the only guy. And we're seeing more and more kids commit earlier. So I thought it was interesting that maybe a little bit of a late bloomer here committed, quote unquote, late, but we're still in August.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, the fact Manny, you've been covering this. I've been following college football. You've been covering recruiting a long time. If you would have said 15, 20 years ago that the top 40 quarterbacks in the country were all committed before week one, I mean, just that unheard of.
Yeah, it's changed so much, but this is the name of the game. But I will say, I think we all sort of learned a lesson last year, right? Where we think quarterbacks are locked in, and then Dante Moore goes and at the last minute sort of flips and goes to UCLA. So I think we all have to sort of keep an open mind with this, especially the quarterbacks who have continued to sort of take these unofficial or official visits after the fact, after they've committed. I think you always leave yourself open to, hey, maybe they'll jump ship at some point. And I think a guy, I know Florida fans don't want to hear this. They hate me enough already as it is, but like
we love you though, Manny. We love you. Don't worry about that.
Poison.
DJ Lagway, right? I mean, there was some stuff on social media early this year, well after his Florida commitment, that maybe USC or another team. And Grace and I talked about this in our story this week in our recruiting predictions. But Clemson and USC not having a quarterback committed, what's to stop either one of them from flipping somebody here late?
Yeah, it's a little tease. We're going to get into those predictions that Manny and Grace had, and I'm going to chime in with mine as well. I kind of doubled back and filled in some gaps there. So yeah, Grace mentioned there's only one top 40. Basically only one quarterback who's ranked in the top 1,000 nationally. He was not committed, and I apologize, I'll probably butcher his name. It's you guys want to take a stab at this? Mailuakai Smith from Sarah High School in Northern California. His 247 profile says heavy interest from Oklahoma State, BYU. I don't know if that's current. Antonio Morales might be trying to get in touch with him for a story, see what's up there. It's kind of an enviable position for him. I mean, to be, rankings change a lot. We see a lot of guys like Lincoln Kineholtz last year, and every year there's guys that come from that 800 range into the top 300. So there's probably someone maybe we're not even talking about yet, has a great senior year and gets some Power 5 offers. But to have one top 1,000 guy is kind of staggering. Other uncommitted quarterbacks, the number 67 quarterback Kamari McKellen from Pinson, Alabama, number 73 Bryce Clavon from Marietta, Georgia, and number 75 Braden Graham from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So some just interesting we'll follow those guys there. But as Manny said, we're probably not done talking about quarterbacks. So if you guys are subscribed to the Until Saturday newsletter, you saw guest appearance from Manny and Grace yesterday, teasing the recruiting predictions. You guys talked about which first-year coaches you think will end up, when it's all said and done, their first full cycle, will end up with the best class. We'll start off with that. I'll give up mine, and we'll double back and revisit some of the other answers from that. So Manny was right. Grace had a good answer. But like Manny is going to, I'd be shocked if Manny's answer is not right on this. Not that yours was not a good answer, Grace, but Manny, why don't you lead us off?
You're right, Manny.
Yeah, no, I think, obviously Auburn and what they're doing with just the ridiculous blue chip percentage. I think, what is it, 14 out of 17 now?
Yes.
So obviously, I think at this point, we kind of just have to hand the trophy to the Tigers, and they're going to have the best recruiting class in terms of first-year coaches. Hugh Freeze, obviously, he's kind of a controversial figure because of what happened at Ole Miss back in the day. But the guy knows how to recruit, and it's funny. I was actually reading some comments for the Hope-O-Meter story that'll be coming out for us. And one of the respondents, as an Auburn fan, is like, finally, a coach who knows how to play by the rules, the dirty rules. Like, just happy that they're getting talent again, right, to go to Auburn. So, look, NIL has changed the game, and it's obvious Brian Harsin just wasn't the right fit there. Hugh Freeze is, and I think without question, they're going to have the top class in terms of first year coaches.
We use the phrase someone's the right coach at the right time. I think Brian Harsin was the wrong coach at the wrong time too for Auburn for a lot of reasons. Grace, who did you talk about in your answer?
I went with Luke Fickell. Wisconsin's got a top 25 class right now. I think that his recruiting landscape won't have to change a ton, just being a Midwest guy. And I think I'm most curious just about the Phil Longo effect and just what we know a good quarterback can do for the rest of your class. But if I'm a top quarterback, I'm at least intrigued, having seen Phil Longo develop Sam Howell and Drake May. And then once you get your QB, he can go recruit his friends. So I like the idea of Luke Fickell jumping right in.
Yeah, and you talked about the footprint there. They've got 4 commits in the state of Pennsylvania, so it's not just Ohio. And Jesse Temple's written a lot about this. They have staff connections in New Jersey. So I think Wisconsin's going to go from, I was going to say the entire Big Ten footprint, but excluding maybe the new Far West footprint. They lost I think it's Booker was not Cory Booker. I think that's the New Jersey former New Jersey senator.
Isn't that a senator?
Yeah. They tight end from in-state lost him to UCLA, and I know Jesse's written about that. I think Grace, you might have written about that as well. So yeah, they're gonna be a recruiting presence, I believe. And I kind of admitting that, like, barring some great shock, it's going to be Auburn. I'll go with Nebraska. I think Nebraska's sort of that same footing as Wisconsin. I think that's going to be a really good evaluating staff. So maybe some of the guys they've got committed now will rise in the rankings. But I'm not sad to see divisions go in the Big Ten, but I kind of wish these two coaches were hired 5 years ago, because I would love to see some Nebraska-Wisconsin battles if Nebraska can get back, and then you still have Iowa, who's always solid in there. So I think I like the profile of some of these Big Ten West schools. All right, first question who will win the recruiting crown, Georgia or the field? Both of you guys said the field. Am I the only one who believes in Kirby Smart?
No. I think for entertainment purposes, right? Like if we both said Georgia's going to do it, it's kind of just boring after that, right? We got to make it a little bit more entertaining. And I'll say this, Florida State, like I made this obviously prediction on the last show, which got a lot of people angry at me, but Florida State, I think, has the potential just because they're after a lot of big time guys. They can flip it. So to me, Mr. Rat Poison says Florida State can win.
I love how Manny is not backing down from this. It wasn't sort of like, Ari will say something once and it'll sound good in his brain. He thinks it and then he says it, and maybe it's like too much of a hot take and he kind of backs off or whatever. Manny, you were digging your heels into this one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Georgia should have the number one class, but if anybody's going to overtake them, in my mind, I think Florida State is that team. I think they've got the most boom potential.
And Grace, you were on board with Manny saying you picked the field. Now, it's not that controversial to pick in anything, picking the field over one team, but you went with the field as well.
Yeah, part of it was a math equation, but also, I don't know. I mean, just going back through the years, I was surprised that Georgia hasn't gotten the best of Alabama since 2020. It feels like every year around this time, it seems like Georgia's going to run away with it, and it feels like that a little bit again this year, but that stat surprised me a little bit. And then I just think Georgia's had a couple misses in state that gave me pause. If you look at the top 10 players in Georgia, I think they've got two of them, and one of them is Dylan Raiola, who I don't really count as a Georgia prospect, having just transferred in June from Phoenix. So, yeah, Florida State is doing a lot of damage in their state. Ohio State is doing really well. I won't be surprised if it's Georgia, but I don't know. I kind of lean the field.
I would say –
Go
just
ahead.
to add to that, I was going to just say Alabama, I think, is another one that has a threat just because they've got a lot of room. And if they keep flipping kids, that's how I think that they would catch Georgia. But,
I'm also not going to bet against Nick Saban until he retires. I'm just not going to do that.
I'm a Georgia believer, unlike you guys. So currently number one in the rankings, number two in average player rating, just behind Ohio State. One thing that would give me some confidence, other than the fact that they're just Georgia and they have the number one class, is sort of like the counter Grace's point. There's a lot of 5-stars in state that are committed elsewhere. I'll consider them flip candidates until they actually sign. So if you've got an in-state 5-star kid in your Georgia,
that is fair.
So I think there's a chance that not all of those recruitments are done. So something to monitor. It's kind of fun that it's not just Alabama, although Alabama seemed to come on sort of, they kind of have their MO. They just kind of they lurk. I think the term lurk was invented for Nick Saban in recruiting. Asked which three teams will make the biggest jumps in the rankings between now and the end of their early signing period. This is a fun one to talk about, but a lot of it is just a numbers game. It's like you look for a team that doesn't have a ton of commitments, that's done a good job so far. But let's we throw out some names. Grace, you go first. Some teams that you singled out that you think could make a jump between now and December.
Yeah, my first one was USC. They're sitting at 17 right now, just given the way Lincoln Riley has recruited and what we know Caleb Williams is capable of, and possibly them making a playoff run. I just don't see them finishing with just a top 20 class. Washington is another one that I think is really fascinating. I think they're also going to have a super exciting offense, and we know, having talked to recruits, that they're pretty pumped about this move to the Big Ten. I think they are at where are they?
12 commitments.
I'm blanking.
Yeah, their numbers are low, and
it's low.
A little disappointing so
54.
far.
Yeah, they're 54
maybe the uncertainty
right
now. for a few months hurt.
Do what?
Maybe the uncertainty of their
future.
I
think that's possible. Yeah. So I think that they will make a big jump. And then what was my last one? Oh, Kansas State. There's just no way that they're at 73 right now. I think Kansas State knows who they are, and they're not, super flashy and not going to come out swinging with a top 10 class every year, but there's just no way that the reigning Big 12 champs finish in the 70s.
Yeah, and they only have 7 at this point, too.
Yeah.
So they will definitely jump up. Manny, what say you?
Well, I kind of went along the same lines of thinking as Grace. I went with Missouri, who's 55th right now. They've only got 12 commitments. Obviously, the change in the NIL laws and the fact that in-state players are sort of being pushed to sign with in-state programs might help them in the chase for some more players. And 55th, they're 12 commitments. Just do the math; they're going to move up pretty easily. I think Utah's another one that's obviously in the same boat, 2-time defending Pac-12 champions, going to the Big 12 next year. Only 9 commitments. They're 63rd. I think you just do the math, and those are obvious ones.
One thing too is Utah was late last year. They closed really strong too. So you don't necessarily think of Utah as a fast closing program or closing strong, but that's really what they did last year.
Yeah, and then the other one was Texas. Obviously, Ari's Texas Longhorns. We might as well start calling them, right?
Yeah.
Part of this is there's a lot of uncommitted top recruits in the state of Texas still sort of available, and Texas is a player for a lot of them. 16 commitments. If they have a great year, it's the same sort of thought process as Georgia, right? They could probably flip some in-state guys. If they make the college football playoff, win the Big 12, going into the SEC, they could have a ton of momentum. So to me, those are 3 more programs in addition to the 3 that Grace picked that I think are really sort of, watch and see them get hot.
Yeah, that makes sense. I threw out Auburn. I really didn't have much to add. I just threw out Auburn for the things that we talked about because their average player rating is so high. Their blue chip ratio is so high. They're probably going to finish with the top 10 class. This one was a lot more difficult. Which team will drop the most? Grace.
I put Florida mainly because, 2 reasons. Number one, credit to Florida's staff and their recruiting department. They currently have the number 3 class in the country right now, which I think is pretty remarkable coming off of the year that they had last year. But number one, there's just not a lot of places for them to go except for down, unfortunately. I don't see them commandeering the number 1 or 2 spots. And then I don't know. I think I'm just still in such wait and see mode with Florida. If they get off to a tough start, this is a bad season and the quarterback situation is bleak like we think it might be. I just think at that point, that's when your class can sort of get away from you.
We'll delete this after Graham Mertz throws for 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thursday night at Rice.
When he lights up Utah.
Yes, old takes exposed. Grace Renner. Quarterback's going to struggle. Offense stinks. An answer that makes sense. Manny, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm with Grace. I think the 2 teams to watch are the 2, in-state teams in Florida that are kind of going into year 2 with their head coaches that could potentially have disappointing seasons again. I think Miami's the other team besides Florida. Miami's got 22 commits. They're 15th right now. But there's a lot of teams that want to pick off JoJo Trader and Zaquan Patterson and some of their top commitments. So to me, you look at, who's sort of in that top 20. And I just think both of them can sort of be put in a position where if they struggle on the field and it's a long year, they could lose some guys, especially since they've got a lot of out-of-state guys. It's always tough, right? To hold on to out-of-state guys as it is. But if you have a really bad season, like Kevin Riley is one of the top running backs in the country. He's in Miami's class, but he's from Tuscaloosa. What's to stop Nick Saban from saying, if he really likes him, from being like, hey, we're taking this kid, So I just think both of those programs are in a position where they could lose guys.
Yeah, Audrey Snyder, who covers Penn State, talks about that a lot. She's followed Penn State recruiting. It's like it's one thing to get the commitment out of your footprint. It's another to keep that commitment. I know James Franklin said they've had some decommits in recent years from the South. So that's something to watch there. I've kind of 2 answers for that. One from like a math standpoint, the Michigan one, from a ranking standpoint, because they've got 27 commitments. So they'll probably drop a bit because their average player rating isn't quite as high as some of the top 5, top 10 teams, but still a really good class. And this is not, I don't want people yelling at me like they yell. Just keep yelling at Manny. But I'm going to say UCF. I think UCF right now just a guess that some of the bigger brands are going to come calling because they've done it. We talked about this last year. They 9 of their 18 commits are blue chippers. It's a lot of good players in their class. So credit that staff. I could see some of the in-state or any teams from the Southeast come calling on some of their guys after the year. So, I hope they keep it up. I think it's cool when you can really see a program change its place in the food chain in college football, which UCF is taking advantage of. There's teams that are joining new leagues, and we're not seeing the recruiting ramifications yet. Houston is one, but UCF clearly is taking advantage of their new lot in life. So that's been fun to watch. All right, here's another one. This is all, I'd say it's mostly speculation, but Manny's kind of, educated guesses on some of these. Flip watch, and you wrote this, Manny. I think we know it's going to happen. It's like we don't necessarily know who, but there's elite players flip all the time. Who are some of the guys that you've already talked about? A few of them, Manny, but kind of who are some guys you're going to keep your eye on as this process goes on?
Yeah, I think Jeremiah Smith, without question. The number 1 receiver in the country who's been committed to Ohio State since last year. He went out and he took all his recruiting official visits in June. He's talking about still going to Florida State at some point during the season. I know that ultimately he's going to Ohio State because of Brian Hartline, and we know how it is, right? I mean, the coaching carousel, Brian Hartline's been promoted to offensive coordinator. If Ohio State has another great year, I mean, you just look at the number of great receivers he's produced. At some point, he could be in line to be a head coach. So I just think all of that sort of throws things up in the air for him. And there were a couple of other guys. I'm trying to remember who else I had on the list. I think one of them was Ellis Robinson, right?
Yes.
From IMG Academy. Ellis is another guy who's originally from New York. He's been committed to Georgia for a long time. Again, he took visits elsewhere during the month of June. IMG is one of those schools that is constantly visited by coaches. There's always sort of people there. And I know Ellis, while he's committed to Georgia, I think a lot of it depends on who his defensive backs coach is going to be. And again, we know the coaching carousel, it changes. People get hired away. And who's to say that there's not a positional change there and he decides to look at some other school. So those are the two primary ones for me, just because they're both, sort of 5-star guys and high profile.
Yeah, Caden Proctor to me is kind of the case study on like no one's safe last year. He was an early Iowa commit, I believe the top ranked Iowa prospect in the modern recruiting era. Came from Ohio program. I think Southeast Polk that the previous year sent a top 100 guy to Iowa, and then just sort of heard some rumblings about a week before signing day. Alabama's interested. He goes down for a visit and flips to Alabama. So no one is safe there. Grace, you kind of highlighted the quarterbacks just as another case study that it's just gonna happen.
It is. What I'm curious about is who it's gonna be, because
just tell us. Grace, tell us.
I look at all these top, at least the top 10. I look at all of them, and I probably last week before I talked to DJ Lagway's high school coach, I probably would have been like, oh, well, Lagway would make sense as maybe the most likely if Florida struggles, etc. And then we didn't really talk a lot about Lagway's specific recruitment, but we were just talking about Florida and how he has handled, social media and a bunch of people tweeting all these negative things at him and how he was so impressed at how he's handled it. And I just walked away being like, I don't know. I wasn't super convinced to begin with, but I don't know. Someone's going to do it. We saw it obviously at the last second last year with Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, but I don't know who I would bet to be those people this year. Do you guys have any guesses?
No, I mean,
well, CJ Carr, I know he's been committed to Notre Dame for a long time, but he's the kind of guy who I saw him play in a 7-on-7, and people were sort of rumbling like, oh, what if CJ, decides to go to another school, and that was sort of like a little rumor out there during the 7-on-7 in March. So I don't know. Again, like I said, USC and Clemson do not have quarterbacks, and those are the kind of programs that I think with a great year, which they're both capable of, right? And sort of, hey, we need to replace this guy. Maybe they become options for top 5, top 10 quarterbacks.
Yeah, the example from last year was Ohio State. Did not have a quarterback. Brock Glenn flipped from Ohio State to Florida State. Then they go after Lincoln Kienholz from South Dakota who came on late in the process. Credit Washington for kind of getting an early commitment from him. So that's a kid. Washington has a really good offense, a great, offensive system, very quarterback friendly, but yet they lost a guy to one of the national powers. So it would not be a surprise at all if it happens. Here's a question I like, and I'm gonna hold this answer and we'll revisit it. Which quarterback not in the national top 100 will have the best college career? I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to say Walker White, number 150 nationally. I think 247 has 100. Kid from Little Rock, going to Auburn. We know Hugh Freeze, quarterback friendly, good system there. I think Walker White's going to have a really good career in college. Manny, you go next.
Well, I went with Trevor Jackson because I discovered him, and I felt I didn't discover him, but just because I got a chance to see him up close and in person at that Elite 11 regional in Orlando, and I just really liked all the other intangibles. I mean, he's got tremendous athleticism, a rocket arm, and what he did at the Elite 11 finals in California. He's kind of under recruited. I just see him as one of those guys who goes to college and everybody's kind of like, man, what happened? How did he sort of fall through the cracks? And not that Ole Miss is sort of a, they're a top 25 program, but I think, in a couple of years, people may be saying, man, we probably should have jumped on that kid earlier.
Good answer. Grace?
I went Will Hammond at Texas Tech. I was just super impressed. Mitch, I know you were in Nashville with me at the recruiting and personnel symposium, just hearing Texas Tech guys kind of talk about their process. And Sam Kahn also wrote about this for The Athletic, just the way they evaluate guys. I think they're going to surround him with a lot of really good talent and a lot of speed. And I like how they just kind of look at recruiting from a common sense standpoint. And they're like, if you're super athletic, but your film is not as great, we're not going to be afraid of you. And so I just like the cast he's going to have. This is obviously an offense that's put up gaudy numbers already. I don't know. I just like this fit between Will Hammond and Joey McGuire.
Good answer. All right, we will conclude this part, our predictions with your boldest prediction. And, I didn't know what to expect, and we're not in this for hot takes. These were not the most scorching of answers. But, again, we're not going to say, Dylan Raiola is going to sign with Georgia Tech or something like that. He's going to love the Atlanta area so much. We're not here for that. So, Manny, you go first.
Well, I went with the fact that the Florida Gators, because this is everybody's fear, right? In Gainesville, that they have a terrible year and then all the recruits flock. What I think is going to happen, because they've got their NIL act together, is they're going to be bad, right, on the field. I'm not predicting them to I guess win more than 5 games, and they will be the only top 10 team in terms of the team rankings to have a losing record. Last year, I think we had 2 of them. Right? Miami and Oklahoma that had 7 losses.
Yes.
So I think this year it'll be the Gators.
Okay. Good answer. Grace?
I don't think
mediocre answer. Okay. Mediocre. Yeah, mediocre.
I know. This is where we really could have benefited from Ari answering this question. We would have had some scorchers.
Yeah.
Mine was that what did I say? Deion Sanders and Colorado do not finish in the top half of the new Big 12. And I just think he's just kind of abandoned the high school model and been so heavy on the transfer portal, which is fine. You construct your roster the way you see fit. But for the first time, starting like literally this week, we're about to have some results. And I think it's going to be ugly for Colorado this year. And so hypothetically, if the transfers cool off, now you're asking the high school kids to fill the gaps, and you haven't, not exactly been super aggressive on the high school model.
Yeah, there's just probably not a lot of relationship building right there. It's tough to come in late when you don't have the relationships and maybe the product on the field. It isn't there. Yes. You don't have either one of those.
I think you got to have one or the other.
Yeah. And mine was Alabama will not sign a top 3 class for the first time since 2018.
Whoa.
And the second time since 2010. So basically, I'm saying they're going to finish 4th behind, I don't know, behind my Georgia Bulldogs.
I was about to say you Georgia homer.
Yeah, Ohio State, and then Manny's Florida Gators. I don't know. So I struggled. I wanted to find
behind
something.
Number 1, Florida State, obviously.
Yeah. Florida State, of course. I tried to find something, but again, I didn't want to just say something for the sake of just trying to be a hot take there. So fun story that was published yesterday, or published on Wednesday, or today's Wednesday. I get confused. I think it was published on Tuesday. And the reason we did that was like a lot of our colleagues at The Athletic who cover teams, we were asking them to make predictions, which Manny has done. Manny wears two hats, multiple hats for the team he covers. And so, hey, you guys cover recruiting. Let's go ahead and make some predictions there. So thanks for doing that, guys. One thing that, Grace has written about, we've talked a lot about, and this is in the news. We all think it's going to happen that SMU, Cal, and Stanford will join the ACC. We'll get the invite. Like, how's that going to affect recruiting? I'll lead us off, and you guys play off that. Specifically for Cal and Stanford, I'm going to go Cal. I think it doesn't. It's a lifeboat for Cal. It just keeps them relevant. Like, I don't think it necessarily helps their recruiting. It just prevents it from catering. Because if this did not occur and they were going to have to drop down to the Mountain West, whatever, I think that would have really killed the program. Stanford, it's a good thing for Stanford to stay at that Power 5, Power 4 level, but they kind of have their own recruiting model. They recruit nationally. It truly is unique in the landscape of recruiting. So I think of these three teams, I think it has the least effect on Stanford. And SMU, it's going to help, no doubt about it. They've been fighting for years after not getting the Big 12 invite coming out of the Southwest Conference. So you guys take it from there. Love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I think one thing I would add is, obviously these programs, the national ones, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, have gone into California and Texas before to recruit. But I think having teams there now in the conference is going to help them maybe a little bit more, trying to convince some quarterbacks out there on the West Coast and some big players in Texas to sign with them, because they'll have a chance to go back home and play. And so I think having the Dallas area sort of opened up to them, and the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a positive to that for those programs. I know ultimately it's all about the money, but I think from a recruiting perspective, you have to sort of acknowledge that there will be some advantages to having them join the conference.
Yep. Grace, what do you think about it? What's your thoughts on SMU? To me, that's an interesting one. We had we had a little meeting yesterday talking about this, and I kind of made the point that it's, they're not getting any revenue in the short term. They don't really have a huge revenue model as far as from ticket sales. They don't draw great. It's just sort of like they just desperately want to see at the table.
Yeah, I think on the flip side, SMU is so interesting because you wonder, okay, are they going to be able to keep some of these top Dallas kids home now? Like, are they going to have a bigger seat at the table than they have in the past when they're trying to not only hold off, all the in-state schools, but Clemson has dipped in a lot. As you said, Manny, like Florida State has gone there. So if you're a prospect and you're sort of maybe thinking at SMU before now as I don't know if I want to go there. They're not in a Power 5, and now they are. Do we see that? I don't know. Like, how much better do they get at recruiting? The revenue thing is interesting, but I think that they'll still compete in the NIL space. So I think the DFW area is a really fascinating one nationally that just got a little bit more interesting at home.
Yeah, and so much of everything in sports is timing. What are your competitors doing when you're getting good or making an effort? Like, I know we can say there's tons of players in Dallas, Fort Worth. There's tons of players in Texas, but there's probably not a finite, but there's not, in that area, the kids that want to stay home. It's not great for SMU that TCU is really good now. That TCU just played for the national title, and we think has the potential to be one of the best programs in the Big 12 because, I'm sure SMU is a good school. It's got a lot going for it. But if you're a kid, how many kids right now are really going to choose, even with SMU going to a Power 5, Power 4 league, whatever we're going to call it, how many kids are going to choose SMU over TCU? Now, if TCU went 3-9 last year, hey, Brett Lashley, you're coming from a better position there. So, Manny, is there anything to that you think, or am I just overanalyzing it?
No, I think there is something to it for SMU. You think about the entire state of Texas, and how many teams are in Power 5 conferences? They were sort of left out completely. And to be the one sort of team in a major area left out. Houston's in the Big 12. You already mentioned TCU, Texas Tech. They're all so this just to me allows SMU to, recruit these guys and not say, hey, you're playing at a lower level. You're playing at the highest level now. And so to me, it's a huge advantage for them. And, they've got a really strong NIL system which was making them a player anyway for guys. They needed this. And so thankfully for SMU, they've got a lot of big time boosters, a lot of money to sort of play with where they can defer the TV money and allow themselves and Rhett Lashley to take advantage and start getting some players that maybe they wouldn't be in the game for.
Good. Yeah. It's just fast. The whole realignment shakeout in the past month has been fascinating. I don't know, I don't know what's more interesting, but just the fact that SMU, like, okay, Cal and Stanford, I see that they're kind of a tandem. One's a private school, one's a public school, but they're rivals and all that. That makes sense joining the league together. But then the fact that SMU is coming as well is fascinating. I got a few mailbag questions. This question kind of parlays off what we were just talking about from Tyler on Twitter. Sent me, said, would love to hear the team's thoughts on what the ceiling is for new Big 12 for recruiting in the 12-team playoff era after all the schools got added. Is it feasible for one of them to break in and be a regular in the top 10 recruiting? I think it's easy to sit here and say, well, all these programs are kind of similar. They're top 30 recruiting outfits. I love that word, but I don't see them being a national power. But Grace, the team that you used to cover, totally changed its place in the college football food chain. Clemson went from a top 25 program to a top 5 program. Who's to say TCU can't do that? Like, and I guess you guys take it from there. 2-part question, kind of what I was just talking about. And if someone does it, who would it be? Would it be a Baylor? Would it be a Texas Tech? I think it'd be TCU.
I would lean, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Texas Tech homer now, but yeah. I like Texas Tech out of that group. Is it feasible? Yes. Do I think it's likely? Probably not.
Yeah, I think in order to be a top 10 team regularly, you have to be, especially now in the new era with the 12-team college playoff, you probably got to be a semifinalist at least once, right? You kind of have to be in the big games. And right now, none of those teams have. I mean, Utah, I guess, would be the closest, being the 2-time Pac-12 champs. So maybe when Utah comes in, they're the kind of program that could recruit at that level. Maybe
I just think from a geography standpoint, I think Utah might have to be the best program, but from a geography standpoint, I just find it hard for them to be a top 10 recruiting team.
Where are they now in the 24 rankings? Do we know?
Utah right now is 64 or something because they've only got 9 commits.
Right. The best class ever, best class in the modern era last year, 25 or 24. So sorry, Manny, go ahead. I kind of cut you off there.
No, maybe it's Dion once he stops having to attack the transfer portal, right? With Colorado. Maybe when he just makes the focus, high school guys. I don't know.
I can talk about football in the 90s now because Ari's not here to yell at me. Utah, Colorado won a national championship recruiting Southern California.
Yes.
And I know it was a different time, but that's where they lived, and they got kids from Southern California. I think if Dion took over in a different era before the transfer portal and he just went all on recruiting, hired a recruiting staff, I'd say sure, Dion could sign top 10 classes, but I just don't know if that's going to be their model.
I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens to the state of California now that there's no major conference there, right? Like, because you can't really call that Big Ten country. They've only got 2 teams there. To me, it's like if Colorado can get really hot in the Big 12, why couldn't they recruit the heck out of California like they once did? It's going to be really fascinating to see what happens in the recruiting trail in that state. Yeah,
no doubt. All right, this is from one of Grace's mailbags that ran a few weeks ago, but there's some good questions. What are some things that prospects usually overrate and underrate when choosing a school? This was from Rodrigo A. And Grace, I thought you had some really good answers. And Manny, you come in and comment after Grace does because you're a guy that, again, it's covered recruiting and you've talked to recruits. You know how teams recruit. You know what they like to do to kind of put their best and their flashiest foot forward.
I think that the most overrated thing, and I went on a mini tangent about this, is the gimmicks, right? Like when you show up to your official visit and there's like custom cookies with like the disgusting frosting anyway, or you're doing 12 photo shoots, or I don't know, like I covered Clemson every day for 5 years and saw the slide and it's cool, but it's like, is this necessary? Not really. But kids love it. So someone who's making these decisions are smart. How many times have we heard Manny and Mitch like that the photo shoot is the most important thing that these programs do? I think that I would more want to know if my kid was going through this process. I'd want to know about development, like NFL track record, strength and conditioning, nutrition. If my kid gets injured, or do you guys have a good track record of bringing players back? I don't know. And I get it, like they're 17, but the gimmicks are just so ridiculous that it just seems like it's totally out of control.
I would say the most overrated thing now is the official visit. I think
that's fair.
What's most important is the unofficial visit and how many times these guys are just stepping foot on campus. I think official visits have pretty much become a joke. You can, obviously there's a limited number that you can use, but it's really more of a world tour for the best, 200 players in the country every single year. Hey, I went here. Hey, I went there. But when push comes to shove, what really matters to them? It's, hey, what's the relationship like with the position coach? How much NIL am I getting? And how quickly can I get on the field? And so to me, I think we've sort of overvalued the official visit in the past, and maybe it was more important in the past. I just think nowadays, show me how many times that kid's been on campus unofficially. That matters more.
Yeah, and one thing that Ari's made this point for years, it's like kids aren't necessarily committing because of facilities and because of flash. But if you don't have the recruiting, the facilities, and you don't have the flash, that can hurt you. Like almost everyone has it now.
Like it doesn't help you, but it will hurt you.
Yes. So I think kids, we say this a lot, and we do talk about NIL here, but we don't love to because we don't know numbers, we don't know specifics and all that. But what you guys are hearing when you're talking to a lot of coaches is it's not just I'm picking this school because it was this number. A lot of it's. And this was like Williams Nwarny's coach said to you, if I pronounce his name right, like a lot of these guys, they're getting good deals everywhere. So they really are, in a lot of cases, picking them for relationships, playing time, NFL development. Now, there's going to be some cases where they are going to go to the highest, quote unquote, bidder. But there's, as long as all the facilities are good and as long as they're getting some sort of NIL package that keeps these teams in the game, and then they can just kind of recruit sort of like old school. Just come here because you like the coach or you like your teammates or you had a good time in your 2 or 3 unofficial visits. So I think that's what we as fans of the sport want to see. We want to go back. Like it's great the kids are getting compensated and all that. But I'd much rather cover recruiting, cover the sport, kids going to the schools because that's where they want to play, not for other reasons. That's kind of my soapbox.
That's fair.
One more. From Sam B, how has the transfer portal changed the decision-making process for recruits picking their first college? And I think we've sort of answered that with the quarterbacks, the fact that 49 of the top 50 quarterbacks have already chosen their school. I think, and Manny, you speak to this because it really hit home in your interview you did, or I kind of guess we call it a roundtable with all those South Florida high school coaches about a month ago.
Yeah.
These coaches are encouraging these kids. Sure, you got to like the fit. You got to like the school. But if you have an offer you like, jump on it.
Yeah, I think as far as how it's affected recruiting, you hit it on the head there, Mitch. I think a lot of these kids now, when they get a solid offer, right, not just a verbal, hey, you got an offer, we'd like for you to come visit, but hey, this is a spot, right? You got to lock in a spot with us now. I think a lot of guys are doing that because they know that if they don't lock in the spot, they could very well be out of luck in as time progresses. And so I think the only kids who sort of have the flexibility to flip whenever they want and go wherever they want are the best of the best. And so a lot of 4-star guys are sort of locking in a spot. They're going through the process and they're sort of looking at plan B and plan C because they could get dropped at any moment. If they don't have a good senior year, if somebody comes open in the transfer portal for that school who's been recruiting them that they really prefer to take over them, they'll get dropped. And so it's sort of like lock in a spot, ride it out as long as you can, and see what happens in November and December when the transfer portal starts to become a much bigger issue, and college coaches have pressure, right, to deliver wins right away and don't have the time to develop players as much.
Yeah, and another thing was interesting there too. You talked to a lot of coaches, and some of them were pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? Like their reputation's meant a lot to them. Like they don't. Not everyone said this, but they don't want their kids flipping. Sometimes they're like, I'll give a coach my word. A college coach my word. Like, he's going to commit. You don't screw him over. We won't screw you over. Then there's some coaches that were like, just lock up that spot. and you can flip later, and if you find the best opportunity. So there's just a lot of different ways to go about it.
A lot of gamesmanship, Mitch, and I think ultimately it's the job of the high school coach to make sure that those kids end up with a ride somewhere, and what they don't want is to be left out in the cold. So I think as one coach put it to me from Miami Central, Jude Joseph, he said, I tell the kids, you got to get in bed quick. You kind of have to get married and just do it quickly, because I'm not going to be here to protect you later if you just say, oh, I'm not committing yet. So I think
that's not why you got engaged, Grace, is it? No decommitting, okay?
No decommitting. No decommits over here.
Committable offer.
Committable offer. That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you go back and read that, it was about three weeks ago, maybe a month ago. Really, some just honest. We do a lot of our recruiting coverage is, our confidential series. We give these coaches anonymity so they can speak freely, and that's great. We get some really good stories there. This one these were all on the record, names attached, and these guys were honest. Most of those guys have been around for a while. They've got reputations, not afraid to speak what's on their mind. So that was really interesting. So, you guys ready for a little trivia?
Let's do it.
No, Ari's not here to.
Yeah.
Let me deflect.
Yeah. All right. How many former 5-star quarterbacks are starting in week 1? There's only there's only one potential one that I'm not sure about, that the coach has not pretty much announced yet. So,
okay.
First, how many? And then let's try and name them.
I'm gonna say 7.
Grace, what say you?
I was gonna say like 5 or 6.
Go higher, Grace.
9, 8.
Oh, Grace wins. Grace got it is 11.
11. Okay.
Okay.
Wow,
Let's see how many you guys can name. Okay, I'll say up front, the one I was Ty Simpson. I think most of us don't think he's going to start at Alabama, but it's 11 without Ty Simpson.
Okay. Well, DJ's got to be one of them.
Yes,
right?
DJU.
Caleb Williams.
USC 2.
Cade Klubnik.
Cade Klubnik is 3. Class 2022.
Drake was not Drake May was not a 5-star.
I think.
I'm going down my list here.
Are you looking?
No, I'm not. I'm going down the list in my head.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember all the 5-stars now off the top of my head. Graham Mertz?
No, he was top 100.
Top 100. Okay, I'm trying to remember. I know he was ranked high. Nope. God, we're bad. McCord, Kyle McCord.
Yes.
Wait, what did you say? Did you
Michigan,
say before that many?
McCord, that's 4. What'd you just say?
Michigan's quarterback.
Yes.
I can say
Bo Nix wasn't a 5-star, was he?
Bo Nix was, I thought.
Yes.
Did you already say that, Manny?
No.
JJ. So JJ McCarthy. I don't know if you said
McCarthy,
it.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember his first name. I was like going to call him Jason McCarthy. That's JJ.
I don't know how. Okay, and
Drew Aller. Drew Aller's another one.
Yeah, I did not have Bo Nix on my list. That was a mistake on me. So it's actually 10. So Drew Aller's 1. Okay.
Wait, what are we at now?
You 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to go.
Quinn Ewers?
Yes. My counting might not be right here. It was 11, so it's 12. It's 12.
Okay.
So you're missing 3. 2 of them. Okay, here's my hint. There's 3. One is starting in the FCS, one is starting in the G5, and one is starting in the P5.
That's interesting. I'm stumped. I'm like,
hold on.
I'm trying to think of the FCS guy.
I am not okay. I could not confirm he's starting, but he's a team captain, so I assumed he was. This is the FCS guy.
What about JT Daniels?
JT Daniels at Rice. Good one,
Grace.
Go.
I knew that because of what we just did, Hope for the Hopeless, and Rice was on there.
Class of 2018, his 4th school. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Okay, one of them's obvious. You guys, class of 2019, he's on his 2nd school, but he's firmly entrenched, had a good late season last year. Grace used to live in the same state that the school is in.
Oh, Spencer Rattler.
Yes.
I was like,
all right. So the FCS one is missing. His dad, he signed with his dad's alma mater before transferring. He's left-handed.
Oh God, this is gonna kill me.
That's not it.
I know. Oh,
I know. I can see the pain in Manny's face.
I have no pain. I've got no idea.
It's pain-free.
You know what? I did better than I thought I was
No,
going to.
you did. You did.
I'm good.
You did a great job.
yeah. I'm throwing in the towel, man. Who is it?
Sam Heward.
Sam Heward. There you go.
Yeah.
I would have never got.
I was thinking Washington in my head when you said
so
left-handed.
Yeah. So 12. That's interesting. 12. And the interesting part, because I went class by class, so I'll include Bo Nix in this because I missed it. So 2018, JT Daniels. I think Bo Nix 2019. Just Spencer Rattler 2019. DJU 2020. Quinn Ewers 21. Caleb Williams 21. All those guys transferred. So I'm like, so the first 6 guys, or first 7 guys, I think I had transferred. So interesting. So again, if Ty Simpson starts, I don't think he's going to start. That would be 13, but the answer is 12. So, all right, guys, I can guarantee this is probably the most you guys have spoken on Stars Matter.
We'll go back to being quiet next week.
All season.
Yeah, you guys go back to like working on stories and stuff while we're recording the pod. It's just like, because Ari's going to come out swinging next week. But fortunately, Ari's on mini podcast, so he'll have an opportunity to spread his wings. So, all right, good show, guys. Thanks for hopping on. Enjoy college football. I know, Manny, you've got a doubleheader this week, right? You're going to be at Miami, Miami,
and then LSU, Florida State in Orlando. So
yes,
that'll be awesome.
Sunday night.
Grace will be monitoring several games for us, and then Monday night, be monitoring Clemson, Duke, a low key. Like that's one of those. Clemson and Duke's one of those. A lot of pressure on Clemson and K Klubnik, like because like Duke, we know Duke is much better, but Clemson, if they want to be who we think they are, and Clemson fans, they don't respect Duke. Let's just be honest. Like if Clemson wins this game 21-17 and they sputter on offense, it's not going to be great. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think like Clemson fans are waiting for the floodgates to open again because they've seen what it looks like. And last year it was bad early. And so not to say that they won't have some growing pains, but yeah, I think they need to come out and make a statement against who I think is one of the best underrated quarterbacks in the ACC, and Riley Leonard at Duke.
Yeah, I think Dane Bugler, our draft analyst, I think had Riley Leonard 4th on his board.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not just like, it's some offseason buzz.
Yeah.
Like, this is legit. He's a definite prospect. So, guys, well, thanks for joining us today. We will be back next week with the next edition of Stars Matter. Everyone enjoy week 1.